So Armand is a professor of classics at the University of Oxford, Jesus College. He has published articles and chapters on the music, literature, and culture of ancient Greece and Rome. He has conducted research into reconstructing the sounds of ancient Greek music, leading to a video presentation in 2017 that has been widely viewed. Recent books include Music, Text, and Culture in Ancient Greece, 2018, co-edited with Tom Phillips.
I'm afraid it was rather bitty in terms of the audio to me in the UK. So the bits that I heard sounded lovely. I'm afraid I couldn't hear it all. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. If not, please raise a hand or something. But what I want to do then is go through some of the main issues to do with understanding what the sounds of Greek music are like. And I'm going to just share my PowerPoint as we go through them. Bettina sang the Song of Sikelos, and I'm just going to say a few things about it. It is inscribed on a column dated to around 200 AD. As Bettina said, it was found in Turkey. And the letter forms on this column give us a fairly clear date, 200 AD. And what Bettina sang was the actual bit that is with musical notation. So the introduction, which says I'm a stone and an image, Sikelos has placed me here as a marker of eternal memory, stops at line 5 of this stone. So this is two sides of the same column, by the way. And it just so you can read it across in Greek, eikone litos eimi dithesime Sikelos enter. There's the word, there's the name of the composer, Sikelos or Sikelos. And I'll say a quick word about pronunciation in a minute of Greek. And then the stone bursts into song. This is what's so amazing. The tune that you heard Bettina sing, Hoson Zis Feinu, as long as you're alive, shine, is written in Greek uppercase letters, Hoson, there you see Hoson Zis Feinu, and above those letters are these symbols, which are letters of the alphabet. Now, it's not a very clear image, so I'm going to show you a transcription here. And here we have the Greek text, Hoson Zis Feinu, Miden holos silupu, pros oligon esti to zin, to telos ochronos apeti. And notice that when I read it, I'm reading it in what approximates from the modern Greek pronunciation, because by the 2nd century BC, AD, that is how Greek was pronounced. So there wasn't this sort of zd sound, hoson zdes, with long eters, hoson zis feinu. And it's important that we recognize that, because then this is a rhyming poem. Feinu, hoson zis feinu, min holos silupu, so u. Then the 3rd and 4th lines, prosoligon esti to zin, e, and an assonance with totelos ochronos apeti. So the e and the eta and the epsilon iota at this stage are pronounced e. They weren't in earlier Greek, certainly not in classical times. So above the Greek words are these symbols. There's a sigma, a so-called lunate sigma, which looks like the shape of the moon, an S. There's a Z, a zeta, very recognizable as such, another zeta, right? Then kappa, iota, zeta, and iota. And these are musical notation that was invented sometime in the 5th century. And the notation was then tabulated in the 5th century AD, about 1,000 years later, in a treatise by someone called Alypius. And he tells us exactly what those notes are. Now, the thing is that these are used to indicate vocal accompaniment. So there is another set of symbols for instruments, which I won't go into, but those symbols are not as simple as these. These are the letters of the alphabet. We know that the sigma, zeta, iota, kappa, you can see, phi, and so on. So a sigma to zeta goes, in fact, up the alphabet. Of course, a sigma is much lower in the alphabet to zeta. And in fact, in musical terms, it's exactly a 5th lower. So you're not talking about one alphabetic letter per tone, as we have C, D, E, F, G, They didn't do that. They had 3 letters which indicated different gradations of the same tone. So alpha, beta, gamma were different gradations of the same note. Delta, epsilon, zeta were the same note, but different gradations, depending on what's called the mode, the scale system in which these notes are written. And Alypius does we're very grateful that he does tell us all that technical data. This is a rise of a fifth to begin with, da, dum, ha, son, and it cease. And then above this zeta, there's another little symbol, which is called a diseme, a double sign. It means that that note on takes twice as long as the first one. And this is a triseme, this bent object, and that means this note takes 3 times as long. So you've got a rhythm. Ha, son, these, 1, 2, 3, and then you also have the melody, da 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 dum, kappa, iota, zeta, iota. So very precise indication of melody. We can sing this as it was heard. I should add that, of course, they didn't have what we call equal temperament tuning. So it wouldn't have sounded exactly as a modern singer sings it with the perfect intonation of equal temperament that we use. It would have probably sounded slightly more exotic than that, with sort of perfect fifths and so on. But and also the timbre in which it was sung, we just simply don't know about things such as vibrato and so on. So it's quite possible that it was sung in a very clear and penetrating voice. The vocal timbre is something that we have to simply speculate on, though we have a few indications that the ancient Greeks did like penetrating sounds. So that's the basic notation system. The Greek alphabet and the differences between our C, D, E, F, G, which goes up, is that the alphabetic notation of ancient Greek goes down tone by tone every 3 letters. Alpha, beta, gamma, epsilon, delta, epsilon, zeta, and so on. Da, da, dum. So down the alphabetic scale. So let me move on and explain the principles of melody. So as we see here, here's the Greek text, hoson zis phenu midin holos silupu, and the melody matches the pitch accent. So many of you will know that Greek was a pitched language. Take, for example, this word lupu, which means grieve, so they say don't grieve at all. The last syllable is indicated with what's called a circumflex accent, up and down, ooh, ooh. And look at the music. So the melody follows that pitch accent. And similarly, if you look at a word like, for example, telos here, which means end, telos, it goes up on that pitched accent. We are told that in normal spoken Greek, the acute accents, such as the one on telos, meant that the syllable took a rise in pitch of up to a fifth. In other words, as far as da da, it could be ta te, but it doesn't have to be that high. It's just within that compass. Here it's just 2 tones, ta te, ta telos, and you get the same with ho chronos. There again, that acute accent is matched by the melody. So this is a very clever piece of composition because it uses the natural Greek tones and it matches them to the melodic song to which it is set. And it is that principle that Bettina is going to use when she sings the second part, and she sings, for example, Homer. Now that we have no music to Homer, we can only speculate. But one of the things we can speculate, I think, reasonably well, because all these documents of music, there are about 60 of them, show this large preponderance of this kind of matching of tone to melody. We can speculate that Homer was sung using a similar melodic principle. So the very first word of the Iliad, of course, is menin, beginning with a circumflex accent. And we could perhaps suggest that Homer sang it menin, A-F-E, for example. We could reconstruct the Homeric musical text in a completely speculative fashion using the pitch accents which sit above the words of the Greek text. And that has been done more or less by many imaginative recreators of ancient music. Now, I'm going to say briefly something about rhythm. This, I've used here what's called isorhythmic translation. So you could sing this to exactly the same rhythm. While life lasts, shine bright, don't let anything you be denied. We don't have life for long, my friend. To all our plans, time decrees an end. So that's your Sikelos song in English, using exactly the same kind of syllabic lengths. And what it shows is an evenness of the limbs of each line, da-dum, dum, da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it also has these end rhymes, bright, night, friend, end, to try and match the Greek. When it was discovered, I have to say, in the 1890s, and scholars first had a look at it, they tended to use words like ditty, slightly dismissive, and I think partly because it's reminiscent of nursery rhyme, particularly of Humpty Dumpty. In fact, you can sing Humpty Dumpty to the same tune. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Now, the funny thing about that is when you have the word fall, it goes down. It's the first time the music falls downwards. And yeah, similarly, this word in Greek, the night, lupou, is the first time you have that melodic descent, which suggests a certain kind of grieving. So the composer, Sikelos, has very, very cleverly composed this so that not only does it conform to the pitch accents, but it also has a certain sensibility which accords with the notion of whether it is upbeat or downbeat. So while it's bright, he's up here, da-dum, da-da-da-da-dum, and da-da-da-da-da-da, and then the first time it goes da-dum there, and then it moves into lots of little notes, da-da-da-da-da-dum. We don't have life for long. And then similarly at the very end, the crescent da-da-da, you get that dejected cadence at the end. So he has actually used a certain kind of word painting as well as following the pitch accents. The Delphic Paean of Athenaeus, which you heard at the beginning, here's a little bit from the great stone, which sits in the wonderful Delphi Museum in Greece. And as you can see, it has similarly gamma, omicron, kappa. It doesn't have the disemes and trisemes that indicate double and triple timing, but it has, there's a theta, for example, upsilon. These are the notes of the scale placed above the syllables, and they give us a very precise indication of what the melody would have been. The other kind of documents, of the 60 documents, the majority are in fact on papyrus, little tiny scraps. This is a very early papyrus, the earliest scrap really, where there is some kind of ability to create a continuous musical text. It's from Euripides Orestes, 408 BC, and it also shows what I was saying that Sikelos was doing, using, well, I said program music, probably word painting is a better word, because this word, for example, katolophuromai, which means I lament, ends with a falling cadence, da-da-dum, and that can be found in other bits of this fragmentary text. And in fact, to some extent, the basis on which I created a restoration of it, speculative restoration. Rhythm, here is a lyric by a man called Timotheus, a poet from Miletus. Rhythms are embedded on the whole in the words of Greek. I mean, yes, we see that those signs, the diceme and triceme in the Sikelos column do tell us this is twice and this is 3 times. Without that, we can simply say that a long syllable is twice as long as a short syllable. So I've used, again, an isorhythmic translation here. In Greek, ukaido tapalaya, I don't croon in the old way. Aina garama creso, my songs are new and better. I mean, it's not perfect, of course. But what's interesting is the last 3 lines, you can get a very clear rhythm. In Greek, to palai den chronos arkon, hone osteos basileue, apito mu sapalaia. It's da-da-dum-dum, da-da-dum-dum. It's that rhythm. See, the old king Kronos ousted. Now the young Zeus is the ruler. This is a rhythm, a meter called Ionic meter, short, short, long, long, short, short, long, long. And it had a particular feel for the ancient Athenians in particular. It was felt as if it came from the exotic East. That's why they called them Ionics. They came from Ionia, the eastern part of the Greek world. And they had a sense of excitement about them. And Timotheus is surely using Ionic rhythm here to give you that sense of rhythmical impetus, da-da-dum, dum, da-da-dum, dum, the sound of the exotic East, from where he came, of course. He came from Miletus in Ionia. A couple of words then about the instruments. This is the double pipe to which large-scale, especially outdoor performances would have been played. Tragedy, for example, in the theatre. Here in the Cleophon painter, we see some kind of performance. It used to be thought of as a tragic performance. What you have is the aulos player here in the center, surrounded by performers. Recently, Eric Charper has suggested that this doesn't actually depict a tragedy, a tragic performance at all. But one still could imagine that in the ancient theatre, you had the aulos player in the center near the altar of Dionysus, and a chorus of robed men. Perhaps they would have been masked, of course, and one of the reasons why this is unlikely to be a theatrical performance of any kind. In fact, it used to be thought of as something called a dithyramb, where they weren't masked. But in any case, they would have been surrounding the aulos player and dancing and singing, accompanied by him. So I'm just going to say a few words to finish off with, because Bettina asked me to, about Rome, because she's also going to be singing some Virgil and Ovid. We don't know the extent to which there was melodic accompaniment to Roman poetry. I mean, we are told of episodes in which you had poets' work being sung in places like the Auditorium of Maecenas, a rectangular building which has been excavated in his house. And of course, when you read the Odes of Horace, it's full of indications that he's playing the lyra or the kythara, or that there are pipes and so on. A book by Stuart Lyons called Music in the Odes of Horace tries to make as strong a case as possible to say that is literally the case, that Horace was playing and singing to his own lyre. That is not generally supposed to be the case. Of course, once a poem is written, it can be set to music. And it was the case that his Carmen Saeculare, Horace's public piece of poetry written for the Emperor Augustus, was, we are told, sung and danced by 54 boys and girls. So he probably did compose some music to that. Unfortunately, there is no musical documentation from Rome at all. So we have no musical documentation in Latin, but of course one must remember that Mesamides, who you heard at the end of Bettina's first bit, was a Cretan freedman of the Emperor Hadrian, his favorite musician. And so Roman music must have meant, essentially, when you're talking about melodies and rhythms, music that had been inherited from the Greek traditions to some degree. Of course, there was more to it than that. There's Plautus and there's Terence. There's a wonderful book by Tim Moore, Music in Roman Comedy, gives you all the possible permutations of how the rhythms of Plautus and Terence might have been heard and sung. And so there are, I mean, they were called cantica, a lot of those arias in the Roman comedy. So undoubtedly there was music, and there were also other musical instruments, a slightly more barbaric kind, like these hornixes, sort of horns of various kinds, and no doubt drums and tambourines, which the Romans may have been more partial to, slightly more brutal sounds perhaps than the Greeks, whom we associate, perhaps wrongly, largely with the soft sound of the lyre and on its gut strings, and the sound of the double pipes, the aulos, which is actually very beautiful and sinuous if it's played properly, as now some musicians do play it. So the question about whether music at Rome can be recreated, well, it can only by creative imagination. Unfortunately, we don't have any melodic understanding, except the indications I said that they would have used, largely speaking, Greek traditions, I suspect. And of course, the rhythms are there, and the rhythms should never be forgotten as an element of ancient music, whether Greek or Roman. Thank you very much.